The StageLeft Podcast provides an in-depth insight into the working practices of the greats from those who were in close proximity when the magic was being made. For more episodes featuring musicians who've worked with the likes of Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, Fleetwood Mac, Bob Dylan and Oasis, go to www.thestageleftpodcast.com, follow us on Twitter at The StageLeft Pod, or like us on Facebook at facebook.com/The StageLeft Podcast. Now for episode 15, recorded a week prior to the release of David Bowie's album Blackstar, is Tony Visconti. Okay, welcome to the StageLeft Podcast, lifting the veil on the music industry by telling the stories of those with a unique vantage point. And today we've a man who's perhaps had the greatest vantage point of some of the most creative geniuses in Western music in the past 50 years. Our guest today has played an integral role as producer, composer and multi-instrumentalist on a jaw-dropping list of groundbreaking David Bowie albums, including Space Oddity, The Man Who Sold the World and the Berlin Trilogy, and was centric to the creation of the iconic sound of T-Rex. As well as this, he's worked closely with a huge list of esteemed artists, including Paul McCartney, U2, Thin Lizzy, Iggy Pop, Morrissey and the Manic Street Preachers, as well as many, many more. Today we'll be talking Bowie, Bolan, Blackstar, touring and innovative recording techniques. So it's a pleasure to say our guest on the StageLeft Podcast today is the Grammy-winning producer Tony Visconti. Thanks for joining us today, Tony. How's it going?
Fine, thank you, Chris. That was a great introduction. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so I got in touch with you in October, and you asked me if we could record this around January time because you had something to talk about. Little did I know that you had you were working secretly on a new Bowie album. How's that been for you? How's that been? You must be excited now.
Well, it's very exciting, so we could tell the news, but it was really under strict control, the secrecy. And, we had to sign NDAs and all that, but wow, the dam has broken loose, and all will be revealed on January 8th when you actually can hear the full album. So it is a very exciting time.
Great. And what's the reason for the secrecy? Because I know you did it for the previous album as well. Is it just for the kind of surprise element, or is it, how comes that it's such kind of been kept secret and wrapped in cotton wool?
Well, a lot of people are doing that. We're not the only ones doing that. It's a matter of like professional secrecy, because we don't want people to know we're making an album. There are spies everywhere, and if people got an inkling that we were doing that, they would somehow pay off the right person and get a rough mix or something like that. The other reason is I think David likes to not to have that pressure on him. If he announced that he was making an album, I think he would personally feel too much pressure. So we announced that we have an album when we know we have an album. We know it's finished, not before.
So I've heard a couple of songs off it. Lazarus and Blackstar have both been released, I think. Both very compelling listens. Blackstar is a 10-minute masterpiece for who haven't heard it yet. A constantly evolving piece of music going in subtle different directions. I wonder if you could tell us about recording that one and how that song came about.
That song was actually one of the first songs we recorded during the... We did 3 separate sessions, one in January, February, and March. Blackstar was in the first group of sessions, and it wasn't... I had heard some of the songs that we were going to record, but Blackstar was written at the very end of David's demos, making of his own demos. So when he brought it to the studio, it was a complete surprise to me, too. I hadn't heard it before.
In the villa of all men, in the villa of all men, stands a solitary candle. At the center of it all.
It's a 10-minute song. We had to record it in 2 sections. And I think section 2 was done the following day. So it was quite an elaborate production, as you can guess from hearing it.
Yeah, so it's an amazing song. And the drums are really interesting on it. Who's playing drums on this record?
A wonderful, genius drummer called Marc Bolan. He's from Queens in New York City. And he's only in his 30s. But you could tell he grew up. He's not only an accomplished jazz player, but he's listened to hip hop, And obviously he's listened to David Bowie when he was growing up too.
And what was the decision to get a new band in and new people? Was it a fresh start, or was it just to get a different angle from them?
Well, David traditionally does this. I haven't produced all his albums, and I might only learn at the last minute that I'm not going to produce the new one. But I mean, that happened years ago, and I've learned to accept that he needs to do this. He needs to just change the regroup, even if it's in his own mind. But there's nothing wrong with the band that played on the next day. They're my friends, and they're great musicians. But this was a wonderful, adventurous step forward. And he did want to make an album that had jazz kind of roots in it. He and I both loved jazz since we were teenagers. We discussed this the day I met him, in 1968 or 67, that we were both jazz fans. And we had this in the back of our minds all this time. We finally found the right people to make the record with.
Because you played the tuba at a young age, and I believe he played the saxophone, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And so it's great that it's gone full circle, and it's kind of you're going down the jazz route on this one. In the past, you've spoken about the importance of pre-production meetings as they allow you to, in your own words, cook up a recipe. What were the result of the meetings for Blackstar? And what was the blueprint for this album? What did you want to do or avoid doing on this album?
Well, again, we wanted to go for a fresh sound, and we had an experimental recording session early in 2014. With David's, another drummer who plays with David, Zach Alford. And I brought along a keyboard, a jazz pianist friend of mine, Jack Spann, whom I met recently at the time, and myself on bass. So that was when the pre-production began. We knocked out about six songs in about a week, but maybe 5 days. And a lot of those, almost all of them, made the Blackstar album. So the band learned our demos. Donnie McCaslin's band heard our demos. And if they didn't make the Blackstar album, they made the musical Lazarus. So I really believe all 6 songs were used.
Look up here, I'm in heaven. I've got scars that can't be seen. I've got drama, can't be stolen. Everybody knows me now.
There's a couple of the songs were put on the compilation album last year, is that right? So Sue or Seasoning Crime and...
Tis a pity she was a whore. Yeah.
That's right.
But these are, very different versions.
Oh, she re-recorded them, right? So they're new versions. Great, okay. And tell us a bit about the songs we might not have heard. So Girl Loves Me, Dollar Days, I Can't Give Everything Away. Can you tell us a bit about those? Because no one's heard them yet.
Well, Girl Loves Me is a real great rock song. It's a slow, slamming rock song. And he's actually written a special language for that song. The lyrics are quite amazing. But roughly based on the... I forget what it's called, but the language in Clockwork Orange.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
He's borrowed some words from that, and he's borrowed some words from the old Soho dialect called Polari.
Right.
I think, and I'm a Yank, and I know all these things, which is quite amazing. But the way he weaves a story about Girl Loves Me, it's almost science fiction. It's so amazing. I think everyone will love that track.
Can't wait to hear it. And how does being in the studio with David now differ to when you first started working with him?
It hasn't changed one bit. He's the same person. He's every time I look at him, I see the 19-year-old guy that I met on the West End in London. He's the same person. He doesn't. Well, he's really got a good attitude in the studio where other people might be very nervous and worry and all that. He's always been gracious and easygoing. I mean, he puts everyone else at ease. He's probably the most relaxed person in the studio. I might be biting my nails worrying about the microphones and the setup and all kinds of details and all that. But he really is very relaxed, very calming. He's got a very calming effect. And the other thing about him is he's such a great singer, and he was a great singer when I met him years and years ago, that when he gets up the mic, in front of the mic, he only sings the song about 2 or 3 times. He doesn't do like 25 takes like other people do. He's so good. The first time is usually great, and then when he sings it the second and third time, it's sheer luxury for me.
Great, that's a fantastic insight. And what could a young musician specifically learn from David Bowie that they wouldn't learn from other artists, having worked with him so closely?
Well, one thing David does is that he's always looking to the future. And I think a lot of young musicians try to recreate the past. They want to, like rock, for instance, is pretty stale right now. It has been for a long time because people still want to make a rock and roll record based in the 70s. I don't know, they want to imitate Marc Bolan and Lizzie, other people that were, and that's all well and good, but that is that has been crystallized, that style. You have to bust outside of the boundaries, do something new and original. And my formula is, if you want to make music that people, you want to grab people's attention, you have to mix it with 50% of what's been and 50% new creation out of your head. This way, if it's 100, some people are so far out, they can come up with something that sounds like it was recorded on the planet Mars, by Martians. That's not going to sell. You got to have half Martian, half Earthling. That's my formula.
Love it. And actually, that's an interesting point, because have you found yourself in the past where you've had pressures from, say, record companies or people with commercial interests in an album, and you kind of working with someone who's really, really artistic and experimental like Bowie? How have you dealt with that situation, or what advice would you give to producers in that situation?
Well, I used to get that a lot, and but in the 70s it was a real different situation, Chris. In the 70s, you didn't get signed unless you were far out. They were actually looking for people who had something fresh and new, and that was certainly the name of the game. And we've got the Beatles to thank for that, because every time the Beatles made a new album, say from Rubber Soul to Revolver and all that, it was radically different, and you wouldn't call it commercial at first. The only thing that makes a record commercial is not the sound of it. It's when people start buying it. Then it's commercial, and then the record labels they perk up and notice. Oh, you like that? Oh, okay, we'll get people who do that, whatever that new thing is, So people are deceived that they feel till this day, record labels think if you have the chorus comes within 30 seconds of the intro and all this stuff, they think there's a formula. There is no formula for a hit record. There is absolutely no formula, and I've always lived by this rule. And I don't listen to A&R people much. I think I only listen to A&R people who love the artist that they sign. They really believe, they have faith in the artist, and they're going to go the distance. To expect a #1 record right out of the box is unrealistic. It only happens once in a million times. So I think we should just come to everyone, the labels and myself, that we live in a musical culture here that really needs nurturing. And it needs new input all the time, fresh input, not the same old stale formulas.
It's a great answer, thank you. Now, you've played on lots of instruments on Bowie records, as well as composing string arrangements. Does he give you free rein over the parts that you play? For instance, if you take, say, the string arrangement you did on 1984, that's very kind of integral to that song. Were you left to your own devices, or were you kind of told by David, we want this, and under fixed idea?
Well, he's great. That's all my own writing. But he said Tony, I want listen to Barry White, then write those strings. So I said, and I love the fact that David thinks I can do anything, but I never even tried that before. I never even wrote like that. So that's not even my generals in my general style. But yeah, like for instance, on the next day, I did some string writing for that, and if he has a particular line, he might play it to me, and then he'll say, now base the arrangement around that. Like I think there was on Heathen, there was I Would Be Your Slave. He gave me a few ideas for that, but he trusts me, and like Marc Bolan used to trust me. He'd just say, Tony, write some strings, and that was it. And I'd be off on my own. And time and time again, I've proved that I do something that they like. So I do get free rein. Yes.
I'm looking for a ride. I'm looking for a party. I'm looking for a side. I'm looking for the treason that I knew in 65. Beware the savage show of 1984.
Let's talk about you as a bass player, because I think sometimes with all your other achievements, your bass playing goes under the radar a bit. And I mean, I was listening to Man Who Sold the World. I mean, your bass playing on that is absolutely incredible, particularly on the verses. What do you remember writing that part and recording bass on that song or that particular album?
Well, that album is my calling card as a bass player. I mean, people do respect me for that bass playing, and I respect Mick Ronson for coaching me. I didn't play bass like that. Mick Ronson said, if you're going to play bass like on this album, he goes, you have to listen to Jack Bruce. And he sat me down and played me Cream. I mean, I was already, I knew what Jack Bruce sounded like, but I never studied him. And basically it's lead bass playing. I'm playing lead on a lot of those songs. And now that I've been rehearsing every day before the tour that's coming up, I mean, my fingers are really, I'm flying around like a lead guitarist, and I laugh all the time, because if it wasn't for Mick Ronson, I wouldn't be doing that. But yeah, I do get asked to play bass a lot. I play on almost every production I record. I pick up a bass and play at least on one track or something like that. And that's something I'm glad I kept my hand in over the years, because it keeps me fit, keeps me young up here. And well, thank you for acknowledging that.
And you kind of touched upon it there. So you're going on tour soon with Holy Holy. Is it to play that album in full? Is that right?
Yes. When we recorded The Man Who Sold the World, we thought it was the greatest album ever recorded. Mick, Woody, David, and myself, we loved it. And then at the end of the album, we split up because David had advice from his new manager. He said, fire the band. You don't need the band. You're going to be a big star. We'll get a band for you and all that. Which is ironic, because a year later, Woody and Mick Ronson rejoined David to make Hunky Dory. And eventually they got their mate, Trevor Bolder, to replace me in the hype and become the Spiders from Mars. But the fact is, I forgot about that incident entirely until Woody Woodmansey reminded me, and he said, Tony, says, we never played this album live. And he was right. We never toured, we never played it live. And I thought, wow, this is one of the best things I've ever done on bass. And I think it's one of my best productions as well, even though it was very early years for me. So I jumped at it. I mean, not at first, because I knew I'd have to start practicing again. And I call that bass playing is very muscular. You not only have to remember the parts, you have to be fit, very fit to play that.
Yeah.
So I'm fit again, and thanks to Woody. So I think this is going to be great, because a lot of fans love this album. It's one of David's darkest albums he's ever written. It's right up there with Outside and Earthling and all that. There's very little humor on The Man Who Sold the World. It's some fantastic lyrics. And the playing is absolutely great. And I have to tell you, we sound great, because we busked a lot of that in the studio. We wrote Black Country Rock in the studio. It wasn't pre-written, and maybe one or two other songs were like that. So now that we've had years to rehearse and to think about it and play, those songs have developed a bit. Although we stick very close to the originals, they sound better in my opinion. I wish we had David Bowie up on the stage with us, but we're not getting him. So we have Glenn Gregory, who I think is so wonderful. He's brought something new to it. You know, we play the whole album a little lower in key to accommodate Glenn's big frame and big baritone voice, and it sounds even darker and heavier. So the fans love it. We weren't sure at first, but after our first gig, we knew we had approval for Glenn.
And do you get the rock recorder out?
No, I can't do both at the same time. But
of course,
my daughter's on stage with us. She's playing rock recorder.
Oh, nice one. Oh, that's good.
We're keeping it in the family.
That's it. I love it. Okay, and you're playing. We'll come to this at the end, but you're playing a number of dates in America and one in Canada. Is that right? Coming in?
Yeah, we're playing 11 dates in all. One in Canada, one in Toronto, and it's a field tour. We're trying to feel if we have enough fans in America to pull this off. I know we have a lot of fans in the UK, and rightly so. But we've been getting letters from all kinds of American Bowie fans. When are we going to see this thing in America? So we're trying it out on the East Coast. Ticket sales look very good, and if they are really great sales, then we'll take it to the East Coast. And you know, America's a very big country. It's very, very expensive, and it's a very long journey. Yeah.
No, that sounds brilliant. So, of course, I must ask you about Berlin. Bowie said of Berlin when you were living there that it was a city cut off from its world, its art and culture. It was dying with no hope of retribution, and that's the time that you recorded Heroes, of course. It must be somewhat surreal when you hear that song, because, of course, David Bowie was looking out the studio window on a break in recording when he saw you by the Berlin Wall embraced in a kiss, which inspired the final verse of the song. Tell us your fondest memories of recording that song.
Well, Heroes was recorded about 2 weeks earlier than when he wrote the lyrics. We just had this song in the key of D. It sounded lovely. It was long and meandering because we never knew when to stop. So the version that I think you have almost every note on the album version. It got close to 7 minutes, and we still didn't really understand where the verses were, where the choruses were. So we kept overdubbing on it. Robert Fripp came in and did all the beautiful EBO feedback. Well, it sounds like EBO, but he did it with just feedback, his high guitar parts. And we still didn't know where the verses and choruses were. It had no lyric, no melody. And so of all the songs on the album, that's the one I am most fond of, because obviously, as you just said, one of my surreptitious actions made it into the lyrics, you know, and I was told so. Yeah, when I came back from that walk, so it's quite an epic, that song.
I will be king, and you will be queen.
And it was you who put Robert Fripp's 3 parts together, is that right? So he recorded 3 different guitar parts and you put them all together, is that right?
Well, the reason for that was he like the rest of us, he wasn't sure what he was playing on the song. Like, do I play this now or that? So I had to take his 3 parts, and we didn't have Pro Tools in those days. But so with faders, I had to select the best bits. You don't hear all 3 at once all the time. Probably most of the time you hear only two of them together. But then I would bring the 3rd one in when it was appropriate, and it was like painting a picture with his 3 separate guitar parts. And I did all that, still not knowing what the song was about.
And you play tambourine on that, is that right? Is that your tambourine that comes in on the final verse about the lyrics about you?
Yes. And David plays the thing that sounds like a cowbell, only it's a reel of tape with no tape on it, and he just banged the hell out of it with a drumstick. So I'm on tambourine and David's on tape reel.
We can be us, just for one day. I can remember standing by the wall, and the gods
regards to innovative recording techniques, one example I wonder if you could share with us is how you achieved the string choir effect on the pre-chorus to Ashes. I think you recorded it using a four-story staircase, is that right? And
That's right. The guitarist we used, Chuck Hammer, had one of the first guitar synthesizers. And you must have, now it's commonplace, but you can imagine David's astonishment and mine astonishment when Chuck Hammer strummed his guitar and out came a string section. I mean, it was totally science fiction. This is like 1979. And, but it sounded a bit synthy, it sounded like, even though the sound was coming out of a guitar, it could have come off a keyboard. And, string sound technology still wasn't great in the 70s. And we wanted to make it bigger somehow. And our engineer, Larry Alexander, said, why don't we put it in the stairwell? We have this 4-story stairwell. I could put some microphones downstairs, microphones upstairs. And that's how we got to make the guitar synth sound so spacious. So a lot of trickery went into that, but in the end, it was totally worth it.
And the piano sound you get on the intro and the outro, so unusual. How did you achieve that?
Well, for years I've been an early user of Eventide products, and I used the harmonizer for the drum sound on low, the snare drum sound, which everyone couldn't figure out how that was done, because I had the only harmonizer in the UK, and that's how I did it. But there's another thing. That company makes wonderful special effects, and they were really early in the game with special effects. So what we tried to do is we tried to get a stereo Fender Rhodes piano to make that sound, but the studio Fender Rhodes was broken, and so that was it. We couldn't wait for the instrument hire to bring one. So I said, let the keyboard player. I said, let him, keyboard player from Bruce Springsteen's band. I said, let him play that on the piano, real old-fashioned piano. I'm going to put it through an instant flanger, and I know a stereo trick we could do with this. So I put it on extreme settings, and the pianist played, and we finally got it. It took about 10, 20 minutes to get that sound, but once we got the sound, we knew we were onto something brand new. Who needed the Fender Rhodes piano? This was way better than the Fender Rhodes piano.
It sounds absolutely great, and it's very, very iconic sound as well. So you obviously have a very strong relationship with David, and I know he was there for you during difficult times in your life, pre-Scary Monsters, and I know that you had a close relationship with Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy as well. Can you talk about any difficulties that might arise that you've had as producer when you've got close relationships in regards to compartmentalising the friendship and the professional duties when it comes to decision making in the studio?
Well, that is a thin line to walk, and I have to give David his due. He is not only a good friend, but he's a great professional colleague as well. And that line between friendship and colleague is very, very blurred between us. I could eat lunch with him. I even went on holidays with him years ago, and we went on a little skiing holiday at his invitation. But not so much with Phil Lynott was a different problem. I love the guy, and I'd socialize with him. But I've said it in my book, and I don't mind saying it again. I know it hurt some people's feelings, but his drug use was out of control, and it was hard to. I like people to have a glass or two of wine when they sing, but because it relaxes them. Every opera singer does that. It's okay. If you're nervous and all that. But what we were getting during the Thin Lizzy sessions were actually like drinking club party, you know, a gentleman's drinking club. And if I didn't get a good take of them by about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it was over by after 5 p.m. It just turned into a party every night. So that was a difficult relationship to juggle. Nevertheless, Chris, I made it work. I told the managers, and we got a little more disciplined towards the end. But it happened in the album. But, you know, it had to be said. These things have to be said.
Fantastic. Okay, let's talk Bolan. I've just literally finished reading your book this afternoon. It's fascinating. I mean, you talk about your relationship with him in great detail, so people should really have a look out for your book. What do you remember of the early Hype sessions? So in the Hype, it was yourself, Bowie and Bolan all in the same band. Is that right? What do you remember of them kind of, I think they came over to your house in Earl's Court and were kind of jamming together as the three of you. What do you remember of those early sessions?
Oh, that wasn't Hype. That was a couple of years before Hype.
Okay.
You know, Hype was Woody and Nick and myself,
Right.
Ronson and myself. But in the early days, I had met David and Marc in the same month. I think I met Marc before I met David. Yes, I did meet Marc before I met David. And I had a flat in Earl's Court, and I was like their big American cousin. They were still living with their mums, dads. And after Marc moved out of his mom's house, he got a little flat in Notting Hill Gate, and they had to share, he and June Bolan had to share a bathroom in the corridor of, you know, with other tenants in the building. They were really, we were all poor. So they used to come to my house for not only to jam and play on guitars, they came to my house to have a bath every week. Once a week there was a bath night. Marc and June. I think David had a bath at his parents' house, so he didn't have to come to me. But the jam sessions were great. I didn't have enough tape in those days to keep it running. Every now and then I did. I mean, I recorded Marc and Steve Peregrine Took on my little tape recorder. But being poor at the time meant you couldn't buy tape. A lot of things you couldn't buy. Food, tape. You know, sometimes it was food, tape. But we had some great times. I had 2 electric guitars, my electric bass. Marc and David would pick up electric guitars, and I would play my Fender bass, and we'd jam for hours on end.
Fantastic. Great story. And I know that you said that he was the most challenging person to produce on a psychological level. As I say, it's all in your book, but wonder what experience you would pass on to young musicians working with big personalities for the first time, and what advice would you give to them in that situation?
Well, if you're working with someone who feels the need to be rude and dominate, be domineering and considerate and all that, you have to weigh it. You have to weigh. You have to balance in your mind: is this worth it to put up with this? And in every case that I have put up with a very difficult personality, and there are more people than Marc Bolan I've had to work with. The truth is, they are the star. Their name is going to be very big on the record album, on the sleeve, and all that. The fans love them. They really don't care about the record producer and the engineering staff. And it's something, like Hollywood stars do the same thing to the director. And some people just have to feel that they have to operate out of a platform of meanness and to put people in their place so that they can remain. So I just put up with it, and I become the better person for it. Yeah. That's the way I feel. We just have to get the job done. Make everybody happy. The star above all has to be happy.
That's great advice. Okay, I know you've got a dash off, so we'll begin to wrap up. I just wondered if you could just answer the following questions for me. What ambitions do you have left in the music industry, Tony?
Well, I love what I do, and I want to continue to produce records. It's still a fascinating aspect of my life. I feel that every album I make, I get better at it. And I don't think I've made my best album yet. I make quite a few. I've made quite a few really good ones, I must admit. I do write. I have an album of my own music in the works at the moment. I don't know when I'm going to release that on the public, but it has just a little ways to go. I've been writing for about 6 years now, but I produce so many records, I don't have time to really finesse them.
Well, you said that you've always wanted to be, when you were young, you wanted to be a singer or at least in a band. Surely now's the time to get something out with your own name on it and you performing on it.
Yeah, I mean, I can sing and I can write and I play very well, and sure, it's just that I've dedicated my life to other people, and quite rightly so. I don't begrudge any 1 second of time I've spent with Marc Bolan or Phil Lynott or David Bowie. It was well worth it. I mean, I love and respect those people. They're some of they are the greatest pop icons of our time. And so it's not that time wasn't wasted. But now maybe it's my turn.
Good stuff. And what fears do you have for the music industry, and how might they be addressed?
Well, I think people in the music industry have become small-minded. They're terrified. They operate out of a place of fear. And as I said earlier, you have to realize that this is a culture we live in. It's not a business. It's a culture. You can make money from culture. Like Salvatore Dali, if he was told to paint every picture like the same as his last hit, he'd be out of business, and he would have been out of business in no time. If you sign a genius, you have to treat that person like a genius and not like a tin of beans. It's not a commodity you put on the shelf in a supermarket. Mm. So treat this culture that we live in with great respect and contribute to it. Don't try to use it to make a quick buck.
Great stuff. And so you're touring next week with Holy Holy, as you said, in the States. What do you think percentage likelihood we'll see David Bowie do the same?
Well, he categorically told me around the time of the next day that he wasn't going to tour again. Mm. And he said, if anyone asks, tell them that. Yeah. So I'm telling you.
Any particular... how comes he's fallen out of love of going on tour? Has he kind of said that to you? It seems such a shame.
Well, I think he loves being on stage. It's just touring is exhausting. Even if you're treated by first class accommodations and first class flights, hotels, and all that, it's still exhausting. You're waking up at ungodly hours. You're traveling through the night. You pick up germs from hotels and all that. I think that's the part that nobody likes. And considering he's probably put on something like 10,000 shows in his lifetime, I think everyone's seen him, that needs to see him. I think now they just want to see him again, and I don't blame them. But that's the part I know he doesn't like about touring.
Yeah,
it's in my wish. This is just me talking, not him. I think he could get one of those cinema concerts where he's in one studio playing to an audience, say, 10,000 people, and it would be broadcast all over the world. It would be recorded. You could download it and all that. Just one concert. I'm sure that's possible, but he hasn't mentioned that to me. I swear that's my own wish. I would like that to happen.
You got to mention it to him. Unfortunately, I wanted to see him in 2003, but he's playing Wembley Arena, and Wembley Arena has the most awful acoustics for in the audience. So I thought, I'll wait until he plays again. And of course, he never toured afterwards. So unfortunately, I've never had a chance to see him. But hopefully, one day he might play again. Okay, well, I'll let you go there because I know you have to dash off. Unfortunately, the sun machine is coming down, and we're going to have a party because we're recording this at 5 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Just want to say thanks for taking your time to be on the StageLeft podcast. You've had such an amazing career. We didn't even get onto Lou Reed or Morrissey or Manic Street Preachers, John Squire, but maybe for another time. But just want to say what a great insight you've given us. Best of luck for the tour and the Bowie album launch. Have a great new year and keep up the good work.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And there could be a part 2 down the line if but I've got so much preparation to do for the tour.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to start with you. Tell you what I have to do today. But anyway, Happy New Year to you too, Chris.
Thanks.
And anyone else who's in the UK who's listening to this.
Great. Thanks very much, Tony. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
As long as there's sun, as long as there's rain, as long as there's rain, as long as there's fire, as long as there's fire, as long as there's me, as long
For more episodes featuring musicians who've worked with the likes of Fleetwood Mac, Bob Dylan, The Beatles, Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, The Prodigy, Oasis, go to www.thestageleftpodcast.com, follow us on Twitter at TheStageLeftPod, or like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TheStageLeftPodcast. See you next time.